Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone online. Judy Lybrook, she should be there. I have with me today a very special guest. Her name is the Reverend Andrea Andres. She is a retired deacon in the United Methodist Church, and so we'll talk a little bit about what that means. This is Parables. This is our storytelling initiative. We think hearing each other's stories and learning from each other, it allows us to develop empathy and compassion. And so I'm really excited that Andrea is with us this morning. Kathy, would you mind shutting that door over there? We might get a little extra noise. Okay. So hi, Andrea.
Hello.
I'm glad you're with us this
Thank
morning.
you. Thank you.
I always like to start with a little bit of background concerning childhood. So where did you grow up? How did you make your way into the world?
Well, it's kind of interesting. My dad was in the military, and so he was in the Army, a civil engineer. And so my brother, who was oldest, was born in Texas. Then I was born in Japan, and then my sister was born in Germany. So we kind of crossed the globe as we were moving. But most of that moving happened as I was under 6 years of age. When he left Germany, we were assigned to for him to teach ROTC at New Mexico State University. And so we came here for 3 years, and so I entered into first grade here at Central Elementary. And then he went to Vietnam for a year and then came back, and lo and behold, was assigned as post engineer out at White Sands Missile Range. So we just hopped over the mountain, stayed there for 3 years, and then they decided to retire. So they had had enough traveling. So actually, I ended up graduating here at Las Cruces High School. And then my husband and I both would have enjoyed living in Las Cruces in New Mexico, but there wasn't a job. So we went where we could work. But then when I retired, this is where we decided to come.
Well, that's really fascinating because your family had a global experience, right? But you have threads here throughout Las Cruces from your childhood even, and your young adulthood, and now in retirement. So that's really cool. So we mentioned that you are a retired deacon, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. But tell us about the job that Robin was searching for, and tell us about your family.
Well, I met Robin at McMurray College. It was college then. It's university now, of course.
In Abilene, Texas.
In Abilene,
my
Texas.
hometown.
And I went to college there, and so did he, and we met and married at the end of that time. And then we went, because he was going to be studying to be a pastor, and I hadn't decided what I wanted to do. So we went on to Asbury Seminary in Kentucky, Wilmore, Kentucky. And I decided, well, since I was there and my folks encouraged it, why didn't I go ahead and get a degree? So I got a degree in Christian education there at the seminary. And that launched me into what was then called in the United Methodist Church diaconal ministry. And so diaconal ministers were lay employees of the church. I don't know if any of you have known Alice Helfrich. Of course, I grew up at St. Paul's, and she was a diaconal minister, and so that's what I decided to become. And then around 1998, diaconal ministers were grandfathered into ordination, and they changed the way the Methodist Church did ordination and called specialized ministry deacons. And so that's how I entered in and became a deacon. So
It's actually still really confusing.
yes, it is.
The
Yes,
difference
it is.
between an elder and a deacon. So we have the Reverend Carol Tuck, elder, right? We have the Reverend Sherry Brown, deacon. I'm an elder. Andrea's a deacon. And a lot of it has to do with the roles that you end up playing. Although some deacons do serve in pastoral ministry as a pastor of a church, usually that's an elder, and the deacons are charged with connecting the congregation with the mission of the world. But it can still be very confusing. It's all ordination. It's all ordination. And so the title is the same in terms of the reverend, but our roles in the community are often a little bit different.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
I think that's a very good description. The deacons often went into specialized ministries, like in my case, Christian education.
Yeah. Or sometimes they work in nonprofits. Sometimes they do counseling, licensed counseling.
Yeah, sometimes they work in the church. Actually, most of them work in the church, but a good number of them also work in chaplaincy, hospice, education, nonprofits, those kinds of things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us a little more about your family.
Okay, my family. Well, like I said, I met my husband, Robin, at McMurray, and then we went on to seminary, and it wasn't till after we finished seminary that we started a family. And we have 2 children, Joel and Nathan, and Joel lives in Maryland on the East Coast, and Nathan lives in Portland on the West Coast. So you have to decide which direction you want to go if you're going to go visiting. And it's a long way. Joel and Rachel, his wife, have 3 children. And so I do have 3 grandchildren. And my other son, Nathan, has told me, "Be satisfied, mother."
So 3's it.
3's it.
Is it. That's great. Excellent. Okay, so you talked a little bit about the Christian education piece and going to seminary and kind of how you moved into the deacon role. Can you tell us a little bit about how you have served in the United Methodist Church over the years?
Well, mostly I've served in Christian education, at least in the first half. I was a director of education. I directed the preschool, the Sunday school, what was going on, helped sometimes with the youth group, and then also did adult education. When I moved to Paradise Valley, I went there as their director of education as a diaconal minister. And I was actually the first full-time director that they'd ever had. And there's a real transition when a church goes into full-time with that instead of just part-time. And so it was a large church. It's the flagship church, or was at that time, of the Arizona Desert Southwest Conference. So if you don't know, Paradise Valley is sandwiched in between Phoenix and Scottsdale. So there's no way to know the difference unless you see the little sign, And so I stayed there for 20 years. I told them when they come, they were worried that I would be leaving very soon after. And I told them, no, I would stay at least until my youngest son, who was just then entering 7th grade, I said, I'll stay until he graduates, because we don't really want to move around that. And I ended up staying 20 years. I'm the kind of person who enjoys tradition and routine and getting familiar and getting to know people and knowing the history around there. So I enjoy knowing people. And it's such an amazing way. As a deacon, that was much easier to do. One of the differences between an elder and a deacon. And one of the reasons I chose to be a deacon instead of an elder was because elders get moved. You know, the hierarchy of the Methodist Church appoints elders and moves them you're up every year. You can be moved every year. And my experience of that was they often moved every 2 years. And that just didn't fit with how I like to do ministry and get involved in people. And so for me, that was a big element of being a deacon. And being a deacon, you are appointed, but you have to find your own appointment, and then you tell the district superintendent and the bishop, and then they appoint you. So it's sort of like, yes, I'm appointed just like an elder is, but they're not responsible for me. I could get fired. I could get, I could have to move on, but, and they're not responsible for finding me another position. As with elders, you're guaranteed an appointment somewhere. So that's what I did.
That's right. As of right now, there's
Yeah.
guaranteed appointment, which has been a huge benefit for pastors who are women and minorities in some areas of the country, including ours. And we'll see if that holds or not, but you don't have that guaranteed appointment as a deacon. That is an important difference for sure. Okay, and so you served for 20 years. And so I know that you have an expertise, you have many, but you have one that you continue to share with us and with others using the Enneagram. And some people know what that is, and some people don't know what that is. And so can you kind of give just a brief explanation?
I will, but let me move into it with a little bit of another explanation. Another reason why I chose to be a deacon was because the elders have the authority over the sacraments, so baptism and communion. The deacons can assist in those, but so can all of you. So if she needs somebody to do the sacraments on Sunday morning, she's not going to call me, because I'm not authorized to do that unless the bishop decides to give specific permission. Thank you. And so that's what happened. So whenever I went to the mountains and gave communion at camp, I had to first have communion with my pastor down in the valley, and then just took that just as if you were taking it to shut-ins, okay? So the sacred words all had to be said by someone else, That's the way that was. Well, as I was deciding whether to be ordained as an elder or a deacon, because I had all of the necessary I had a master's in Christian education and theology and all, so I could have transitioned into that. But and for a lot of people, one of the main reasons they went to elder was because of the sacraments. And I had begun working with spiritual direction and with prayer ministry, and I became so immersed in prayer ministry that it was like I didn't feel the need to be the one who presided over the sacraments. To me, prayer was the sacrament, I call it a sacrament, that really made a difference for me. And so I began looking at different kinds of spiritual direction and all. And that led me into the Enneagram. The Enneagram is a Greek word, and it's very easy. Ennea is the word for 9, and gram, a pattern. So it's a pattern of 9. So if I told you what the pentagon was, you would know that's a 5-sided building or figure. Well, an Enneagon would be 9-sided. So the Enneagram is a personality profile which explores 9 different specific personalities. And what's very interesting, you can go back to the 3rd century and you can find a monk named Evagrius Ponticus, who was called the first psychologist of Christianity. And he listed 8 faults, okay? 8 faults. And the one that he didn't list was his own, which is quite often. We can see everybody else's fault, but we can't see our fault. And although if you read his works, you can see some inklings of it, that he was well aware of it. And he was a desert monk. So people would come out to the desert to talk to him, to explore their own life and Christianity. And he became so very well known because he was just spot on. He could, you talk to him for a little while and he could, this is your besetting sin. This is the problem that keeps on following you around. And until you deal with it, you're not going to be able to get very far. And so the Enneagram, that's where we can see it, and you can see it all over the world in different ways. But in the last century, it has become more codified and studied, and now you can find quite a few books on it. And it's not always necessarily tied to spiritual life, okay? You get some comedians, some actors, some store places that go into personality profiles, and that helps them understand why people act the way they do. Because we act the way we do because of the forces that we have grown up with and our own nurture and our nature, what we have inherited. It's kind of a mix of that. So studying the Enneagram helps you see the patterns of why you do what you do. You know, after you're 70 years old, you look back and think, why do I still keep on doing that? Well, it's actually very easy to see. It's just we're often one of the ones that can't see it.
I really encourage you to talk to her about this. It's easy for us to go, oh, this is just like another personality typing thing. We take a test, we find out what we are, and that is not what this is.
Yeah.
The best way to learn about yourself in the Enneagram is to read and study it, not just take like a test you find on the internet that tells you what you are, but to read about them. One of the people who taught me early on about the Enneagram, Andrea, said if you read these books about the types, when you want to throw the book across the room, that's probably your type.
Yeah.
And so it's a path of self-discovery that helps you understand, not like, okay, this is my type, so the world's just going to have to deal with it. Mm-hmm. But these are the ways that I normally deal with these things, and this is my motivation for doing that, and how can I grow?
Yes, and to not use it as an excuse. Oh, well, I'm just a type 7, and they do that, so deal with it. Right. And it's like, no, that's not exactly what it's for. One of the things I like to tell people about the Enneagram is people will tell me, well, I don't want to be put into a box. You know, don't say that this is the way I am. And the Enneagram certainly does not do that. But what we say to people is, my friend, you are already in a box of your own making. Discovering the Enneagram can help you open the door and leave the box when you want to, because we all develop our personality because it works for us. That's how I've learned to react to the world. That's how I've learned to live in the world and be able to operate. But every once in a while, especially when you hit your 20s and your 30s, you probably started saying, there's got to be a better way to do this. I don't want to do that anymore. I like the way that person deals with this question, so maybe I'll try to see if I can do that. And that's when we begin to expand. And the fact of the matter is that we don't, we never leave that personality that we've created in those first 20 years. But we do get to massage it and, like a rock that has water flowing over it. Eventually, some of the rough edges get knocked off because we've discovered another way to do it. But the fact of the matter is we do it because it makes sense now. And it makes it so that we don't hurt so much and we don't suffer as much. I think one of the things the Enneagram helps us do is to avoid creating suffering that doesn't need to be there, because we can sidestep some of those things. And for me, the Enneagram helps provide that part of ministry that I have with spiritual direction. It helps me help people see what exactly they can do and what kind of a prayer path or a service path or something that they might try to be able to move on.
It's really, really interesting. She's done some work with the staff, which has been really great, and the staff already had an awareness of that when Ross was here, and maybe even before that. But Andrea came on when I came on board and worked with us, and so if you'd like to talk with her more about that, I think it's really worth your time. So I'm going to ask you one more thing and then open it up to let people ask you questions. Why Morningstar?
Well, I grew up in St. Paul's. So that's where I was confirmed and graduated from, all of that. And I was aware of Morningstar having been created because my folks continued to live here. And so I would come back every so often. And I knew there was a university because that's where my grandmother went. And I can remember at university going to pack sandbags because the water would come, the water that the builders, when they built the houses, the water was directed right toward the door of university. If anybody remembers that in the 60s. And people would get called out to come put sandbags up so that it wouldn't flood the church. And I knew El Calvario was there. And so I took some time and went to all of the churches. And I enjoyed this church. I did not disenjoy the others. They were both, I could have seen myself at any of the churches, but I enjoyed this one, and I liked, when I first came, I liked the 8 o'clock service, because I like to get up early. And then mostly I go to the 11 o'clock service now, which is okay. I've just had to, it's one of those things where you just have to, okay, things are changing. So what to do, because for one thing, having worked at a large church, I know what a toll it is for the church staff to do 3 morning services. I mean, it's just really difficult and time consuming. It's just not just one more hour. So I knew that was going to happen. So I knew it wasn't going to last long. But I tend to come to the 11 o'clock now. Although I'm sorry I missed some of the music that you have at 9:30. So sometimes I come to the 9:30.
We're glad you're here. I am really fortunate because we do have these wonderful retired women, deacons and elders here. And of course, Gordon is in and out as well, and we appreciate him too. But when I was early on in my ministry, my pastors would say, you don't want to go to a church that has a lot of retired pastors because they won't leave you alone. They're going to get in your business. They're going to tell you what to do. And I just have never found that. It's so wonderful on a morning that I have COVID to be able to text Carol Tuck at 6:30 and say, can you do communion today? You know, it's really wonderful to say to Andrea, I want to lean on your expertise. Or Sherry, can you work with Johnny so that we can have a really great adult study on Wednesdays while I'm working with the youth? They have these wonderful experiences and expertise areas and history, and we would just be totally remiss to overlook that and think that we can do it on our own. So thank you, Andrea and Sherry and Carol, and thank you, Gordon, when you're available for us. It's really a blessing to have the richness of all these wonderful people. So what questions do you have or comments do you have for Andrea?
Give me a call. Give me a call, and we'll talk and see how would be a good time to do that.
So it's really tricky when I give her a call because I'm a 9. I identify as a 9, and so does she. So she knows me really well. So she's like, "You're probably doing this right now." Or, So all the numbers are good. Right, we need all the numbers.
Oh, yes.
Right?
There's nothing wrong with any of the numbers. It's just each number has its own little sticking point. And because you have that sticking point, you maybe don't see all the others. I was told that you are an expert on 1/9 of the personalities around. So.
Yours, right?
Yeah, yours.
What else? Anything else for Andrea? Isn't she so fascinating? A very fascinating person. Yeah.
There are a lot of books now. When I started with this in like 2000, there were very few. There are so many now that it's gotten to where that some of them are not as good as others, as that develops. But I could give you a list. In fact, do you go on the internet at all? Yes. If you go enneagramworldwide.org, that will take you to one site. But all you have to put in is Enneagram, ENNEA gram. And it will take you, you'll get lots, you'll be overwhelmed.
I have a couple that Andrea has recommended to me that I can share. I can even bring those to Bible study tomorrow, and we can share a little more about that in other ways. But there are many out there, and so having some guidance on where to start is important. So I would recommend calling Andrea, or if you want to call me, I can get you connected to Andrea, and we'll get you the good resources.
And if there's enough interest, we could do a class for a while. And we could either do that on Sundays or we could do it some other time.
Yeah, we are wide open to the schedule of the people who are interested in what works for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's thank Andrea for giving her time this morning. Thank you all for being here. Thank you. And next week we have Leslie Templeton. Yes, in the hot seat, as we say.